Angel Reese was once the face of women's basketball, but now her podcast is tanking. From 5,000 views to barely 70, fans are abandoning ship. What happened? And why does one tweet have people calling this a PR disaster in the making? Let's break down the downfall of Unapologetically Angel.
They chicken this Unapologetically Angel podcast. Now, the numbers from the podcast shows that fans are sick of it. Once again, I can't make this up. I'm showing y'all right now. She might need to get Castanat.
You'd honestly have to see it to believe it. Go take a look at the view counts on Angel Reese's latest podcast episodes. No, seriously, go look. For someone who was once at the very heart of the women's sports conversation, it's shocking to see the numbers now. We're not talking thousands. We're not even talking hundreds. Some of these episodes aren't reaching past 70 views. That's not an exaggeration, it's real. One episode in particular, the one where she brought on Jada Cheeves and Destior, didn't even clear 70 views. It stopped at 66. It sounds like a typo, but it's not. And the reason? Well, the content took a turn no one really saw coming. Instead of sticking to basketball or even something close to the sports world, the episode spent a full hour on conversations about dating rich men. That's right, an hour-long detour from the very thing that built Angel's name in the first place. The die-hard basketball fans who had been loyal from the start, who looked forward to her voice as a strong woman in sports, were left stunned. Some were so confused they actually thought they had clicked the wrong show. Wait, is this the same podcast? They wondered. This wasn't just a creative experiment or a one-off fun episode. It felt like a major shift in direction, a confusing left turn into something that didn't fit the brand at all. The core audience that had come to admire Angel for her athletic presence, her boldness, her commitment to the game, they felt pushed aside. People weren't just uninterested, they were disappointed. Something that had once felt inspiring now felt out of touch. The entire vibe of the podcast seemed to change overnight, and fans were left asking one simple question. Why?
Angel Reese's latest podcast decision has left her listeners disappointed, primarily due to her choice of guest. Yeah, I think a lot of people were like, who cares about these people? Honestly,
it all could have just been a rough patch, a few low-view episodes, a small dip in engagement. But what really turned it into a full-blown storm was how Angel Reese reacted to the feedback. When fans voiced their opinions, expressing confusion and frustration about the direction of her content, instead of responding with understanding or even just staying quiet, she fired back with something nobody expected. Shut the F*** up. Asterisk. That wasn't just a clapback. It was a moment that changed everything. It felt cold. It felt personal. And for a lot of people, it felt like a slap in the face. These weren't trolls. These were longtime supporters. People who had rooted for her from the college courts to the national spotlight. They weren't trying to tear her down. They were confused, hurt, and trying to understand what was going on. And her response didn't offer clarity. It brought distance. Suddenly, the problem wasn't just about what kind of guests she was bringing on. It wasn't about dating talk or Instagram influencers anymore. It was about trust. It was about character. If Angel couldn't handle honest feedback from the same people who helped lift her up, could those fans still stand behind her? Could they keep supporting someone who shut them out when they spoke up? And while all of this was unfolding, another name kept popping up, Caitlin Clark. Clark, who was spending her offseason focused, sharp, locked in. She was training hard, keeping her brand strong, and staying completely in her lane. She was building momentum with every move. Meanwhile, Angel's public image seemed to be sliding. The contrast was becoming clearer with every week. One athlete was leveling up, the other was facing backlash. And the comparison wasn't coming from critics. It was coming from fans who wanted more and weren't sure if they could still find it in Angel.
hosting fellow athletes like Dejanay Carrington, Skylar Diggins-Smith, and basketball legend Lisa Leslie, to musicians like Sexy Red, Glorilla, and more, the Sky Forward received positive feedback from listeners and viewers. However, the most recent episode received mixed...
When Angel Reese announced her guests for a new episode, Jada Cheeves and Destior, many fans raised an eyebrow. Not because these women aren't famous. They are. But they're not athletes. They're not connected to basketball. They're better known for their social media influence, fashion, and celebrity relationships. And that's fine. There's room for everyone. But what happened next left her core audience completely thrown off. Instead of the usual deep dive into sports, mindset, the grind of training, or the mental toll of being a young star in the spotlight, the episode shifted into something that felt like a late-night reality show. For over an hour, the conversation stayed focused on dating rich men, personal preferences, and lifestyle talk that had nothing to do with basketball. And it wasn't just one or two questions, it was the whole episode. No mention of the game. No locker room stories. No behind-the-scenes insight. Just surface-level dating advice wrapped in luxury brand names. The fans who tuned in that day weren't looking for gossip or glam. They were looking for the player they believed in. They were hoping for a peek into Angel's life as an athlete, or at least a connection back to the world that made her a star. Instead, they got something that felt like it belonged on a different platform altogether. Some tried to brush it off as just one odd episode, but for many, it felt like something deeper. A change in direction. A loss of focus. This wasn't the same show that once gave young women a reason to believe that you could be powerful, talented, and unapologetically yourself in the sports world. This new version felt out of place, and the worst part? It didn't feel like it was made for her real fans anymore. It felt like it was chasing a different audience altogether and leaving the original one behind.
Quote, issue regarding relationships. As for Reese, she mentioned men's insecurities when it comes to women earning a higher income. Interview fans expressed their dismay over the responses they gave about money in relationships, feeling it overshadowed other important topics. Quote, they said a lot of nothing. The responses are dumb.
Not only did the content become repetitive and empty, but it started to feel like a bait-and switch. This wasn't the fire-driven, bold, and unapologetic Angel Reese who had taken over headlines during her LSU days. This version seemed more focused on internet fame, surface-level conversations, and influencer-style chatter than on building anything real or lasting. And the fans noticed. Quickly, comments started pouring in across platforms. Longtime followers voiced their disappointment openly. I feel like she's forgetting why we supported her in the first place, one person wrote, echoing the feelings of many. Another said bluntly, this isn't it. I came here for basketball, not a reality show. The backlash wasn't subtle. It was loud, sharp, and unrelenting. People weren't just confused. They felt tricked. They had come expecting insight, passion, and sports talk, but instead they got long-winded conversations about dating wealthy men, relationships, and vague takes on gender roles that didn't connect with the audience. One moment from the podcast stood out more than most, and not in a good way. When Angel began talking about men's insecurities regarding women who earn more than them, it quickly spiraled into a quote that left listeners stunned. A lot of men don't also like women, she said. The grammar was confusing, the message unclear. Viewers didn't know whether to laugh or cringe. My IQ dropped listening to this, one person joked. But behind the jokes was a serious concern. This podcast episode didn't just miss the mark, it missed the entire point of why people tuned in. Once a show praised for its quality, supported by Shaquille O'Neal's podcast network, and backed by high production value, Angel's platform was suddenly struggling to pull in even the most basic engagement. One episode, released just minutes before it was checked, had only 66 views. Not 6,000. Not 600. 66. Another one barely scraped by with 780. And the problem wasn't just one episode, it was becoming a pattern. The audience that once celebrated her every move, that boosted her from a college standout into a cultural icon, had started to check out. The worst part? It all felt preventable. Angel's biggest misstep wasn't just a tone-deaf episode or a random celebrity guest. It was a growing disconnect from her roots, from the game, from the fans, and from the authenticity that made her great. Instead of highlighting rising stars in women's basketball, sharing honest stories from her own journey, or offering behind-the-scenes looks into the life of a professional athlete, she chose to spotlight influencers known mostly for who they date, not for what they do. One fan summed it up perfectly. You've got all these amazing women doing great things in the sport, and this is who you choose to interview? Rappers' girlfriends? Meanwhile, the comparison to Caitlin Clark couldn't be more stark. While Angel's show was losing direction and bleeding viewers, Clark was riding a wave of success, posting clips that pulled in millions of views, filling arenas, and solidifying her status as a future face of the WNBA. She wasn't chasing trends, she was creating moments. And fans noticed. As one platform was imploding under the weight of confused branding and inconsistent messaging, the other was thriving on clarity, consistency, and connection. The numbers were brutal. Angel's podcast hadn't crossed 5,000 views in over a week. That's not just a dip. It's a dramatic collapse for someone with high-level endorsements, constant media attention, and a loyal fan base from her college days. This wasn't some slow fade into the background. It was like the light switch flipped off, and everyone walked away. And when fans leave, they don't always come back. People weren't just disengaging. They were unsubscribing, unfollowing, and distancing themselves from her brand. It wasn't apathy. It was a choice. They felt ignored. They felt forgotten. The bond between a creator and their audience is fragile, and Angel had broken it. And the truth was hard to ignore. Flashy guests and viral attempts mean nothing if there's no substance behind the mic. Even with access to a high-budget studio, big-name connections, and a massive head start in the media space, none of it mattered once the trust was gone. Angel misread the room. She assumed her audience would follow her no matter where she went. But they didn't want influence or fluff. They wanted the real Angel Reese, the competitor, the leader, the groundbreaker. And now, that version seems harder to find than ever. One fan said it best: "This podcast feels like 3 kids reviewing food they've never eaten." Another added, "I can literally feel my brain melting listening to this." These aren't random trolls. These are supporters who once cheered for her loudest and now feel completely let down. The disappointment is real. The betrayal is deep. Angel was supposed to be a pillar in the new era of women's basketball. She had the story, the talent, the presence. But somewhere along the way, the vision got blurry. And instead of correcting course, she doubled down on a version of herself that didn't feel genuine. Her podcast should have been a platform to uplift, inspire, and connect. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about what happens when you lose sight of what made you great to begin with. It started with a single comment, but the message behind it rang louder than any applause Angel Reese had ever received on the court. A frustrated viewer didn't hold back. The least informative podcast on earth. Yikes. Harsh? Maybe. But it captured a growing sentiment echoing across social media platforms. Fans, once fiercely loyal, were now confused, disappointed, and openly questioning her direction. Instead of taking a breath, pausing to listen, and reflecting on the feedback from her base, the very people who helped elevate her, Angel chose a different path, a much more destructive one. Rather than clarifying her vision or adjusting her content to meet her audience halfway, Angel hit back. She didn't address the concerns. She didn't acknowledge the shift in tone or the podcast's deviation from what fans expected. She didn't even try to smooth things over. Instead, she dropped a grenade on her public image with 4 blunt words: "Shut the F up." That tweet, short and sharp, turned a shaky situation into a full-blown PR crisis. And it only got worse from there. Just hours after that tweet, media outlets began reporting the painful truth: her podcast was failing. Badly. View counts were embarrassingly low, engagement was plummeting, and the criticism was no longer coming from the sidelines, it was front and center. The moment she posted that tweet, any chance at salvaging goodwill disappeared. It was a message to her supporters that their voices didn't matter. A clear sign that she wasn't interested in listening, only in defending herself. Angel had countless opportunities to handle things differently. She could have released a simple statement: "I'm trying new formats. Let me know what you think. Basketball content is coming soon." That would have been enough. A soft reset. An easy win. But instead, she let pride speak louder than wisdom. And the cost? It was everything: credibility, connection, and trust. To make matters worse, one interview that never even aired continued to haunt her. Fans kept bringing up the DaBaby episode, an unaired conversation that many claim was so off-base, so tone-deaf, that it was scrapped altogether. The whispers became louder, the backlash more intense, and soon her entire social media presence felt like a war zone. Loyal fans weren't just upset, they felt betrayed. They voiced their heartbreak, not just criticism. One fan summed it up best: "We're the shareholders of your content. If you can't handle the feedback, maybe step away from the mic." This wasn't just noise. This was a wake-up call. People weren't mad because they hated her. They were mad because they loved her. Because they believed in what she once stood for: grit, passion, and unapologetic dominance on the court. What they were seeing now wasn't the athlete who electrified LSU, who stared down critics with confidence and backed it up with results. This was someone chasing clout instead of clarity. And the comparisons began to roll in. Caitlin Clark doesn't even have a podcast, one fan wrote. But if she started one tomorrow, it'd crush this in a week. Others echoed the same sentiment. Clark, despite being just as famous, if not more, understood how to engage with an audience. She didn't insult people. She didn't post defensive tweets. She stayed focused, humble, and in touch. That contrast made Angel's missteps feel even more glaring. Fans didn't just critique, they offered solutions. They suggested guests who were women of influence. Coaches, executives, entrepreneurs, trailblazers in the sports world. Instead, what they got were influencers and soundbites with no substance. One comment nailed it. All the amazing women out here doing real things, and you bring on rapper girlfriends? That question kept showing up in different forms. Why not spotlight people who've actually accomplished something? Why not use your platform to inspire instead of entertain? And as the disappointment grew, so did the doubt. Content creators and industry insiders began asking the same question behind the scenes. Is Angel even serious about basketball anymore? Or is she chasing the red carpet, not the rebound? One viral post hit the nail on the head. She's not locked in on hoops, she's chasing likes and viral drama. What made this even harder to watch was how avoidable it all was. A single conversation with a PR professional could have changed everything. They could have helped her craft a thoughtful response, shown her how to thank her fans, acknowledge the criticism, and pivot back toward the sport she claimed to love. But instead of choosing repair, Angel chose retaliation. She scorched the earth. And in doing so, she didn't just lose followers, she lost something much more valuable: faith. Fans who once believed in her were now walking away, not with anger, but with sadness. The damage didn't stop at the podcast. It spread like wildfire, threatening her brand, her image, and yes, her future in basketball. Sponsors started paying attention. Brands that once lined up to partner with her were now reassessing. And her teammates? They feel that tension too. When your own audience turns on you, the ripple effects go far. And here's the thing. This wasn't some low-budget, last-minute side project. This podcast was backed by Shaquille O'Neal's media network. It had professional editing, strong promotion, and every tool needed to succeed. But none of that mattered once the heart was gone. Angel forgot the most basic rule in this era of personal brands. If people stop feeling like you respect them, they'll stop showing up. The comments section told the story plain and simple. Subscribe at your own risk. That's how far things had fallen. Viewers had to find the podcast, click the link, hit subscribe, choose an episode, and even after all that, they were still saying, "Nope, I'm out. This is trash." That's brutal, but that's real. And what's more, this isn't just about a podcast anymore. It's about the core of her identity as a public figure. Angel Reese is more than a basketball player. She's a brand, a voice, a movement, or at least she was. Now that image is cracking, and if she doesn't course correct soon, it may not be fixable. So is the hype fading? Is the Angel Reese wave slowing down? Some say yes. And if it is, it's not because people stopped caring. It's because she stopped listening. This should serve as a hard lesson, not just for Angel, but for every rising athlete navigating fame. Popularity alone doesn't build a legacy. Respect does. Authenticity does. And the willingness to engage with your supporters, not shout them down, is what keeps a career strong long after the headlines fade. Angel had everything she needed: the platform, the resources, the presence. What she lost was the connection. And in this digital age, that's the one thing you can't afford to fake. From powerhouse athlete to podcast backlash, Angel Reese's story is turning into a cautionary tale in real time. Whether it's a bump in the road or a total brand collapse, we'll be watching. If you've got thoughts, drop them in the comments. And hey, if you found this breakdown helpful, give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and thanks for watching. We appreciate you.